this is like the last power play, and we better make sure that we are not standing too much in between people and their cocktails. So this is a flash panel. Yeah. So we'll do it in a quick, flashy manner. CSR, interestingly, has given a very interesting corporate advantage in India. We are a very unique country which has this law. You heard a lot about purpose, mass, taking people along, taking everybody along, partnership with government, and adding value to society. A lot of those were themes, from the morning, and the evening. The interesting thing is CSR today gives us close to 45 to 50,000 crore of additional funding to actually add value to society. Interestingly, the first 10 years of the law gave us about 2.2 lakh crores, roughly $25 billion. But if you don't catalyze it and use it in a collaborative way, that's 1 month GST and it'll get washed away very quickly, right? So a lot of organizations, talked about what they would do, how they would, do it in their organization. But I think the collaborative advantage is something when it comes to society, what we will do for our company is something we can talk about in our office, but what will we do for Bangalore? What will we do for Karnataka? What will we do for India? Needs to be done in a much more collaborative, kind of a way. So, Aditya, if I can start off with you, what would you say from your experience of how collaboration is happening and needs to happen in the space of societal impact, and what role corporate has to play there? And any examples would be great.
Yeah, sure. So, I was reading your report, 40,000 crores of CSR per year. That's only 4 billion, it's not that much. 4,000 companies that contribute to that, which I think the potential of that is immense. And there's so many companies coming into India that will contribute to that and are. And I think the biggest advantage, the big strength of this country is the human talent, right?
Yeah.
But the biggest weakness is the ease of doing business. And I'm a big fan of Mr. Priyank Kharge, but unfortunately, dealing with the government is the hardest thing in this country.
Yeah.
And I find that companies that come into India have that hesitation of, hey, I want to do things in education, infrastructure, medical. Those are the big places where CSR goes, but it's so linked with government, I just don't know how to approach it. And I feel that's where we've carved out a niche where, as Embassy, we are contributing our funds towards some of these things, but we're also engaging with our corporate clients and saying, hey, we can do more together. Why don't we work together, curate programs? Some of them might be specific to you. Might be, let's say, with Cerner Healthcares, with the mobility company, with Mercedes, it might be mobility. Volvo Mobility, I know you're doing something in that space. So I think, bringing people together, using companies for advantages, using local companies to be a conduit between government and themselves, I think makes a lot of sense. And for me, this is the way things should be.
Wonderful. And if I can just build on that, and interestingly also working with government, a lot of the CSR goes to rural because of ease of doing CSR is better in rural. It's much more harder to do CSR in urban because any project you take up, you need permissions from 3 different or 4 different departments. In rural, you just have to align with the Gram Panchayat or somebody like that. So, when you're looking at corporates coming in and contributing together, one is money, but the corporates also sit with a lot of human capital, intellectual capital. Through volunteering and many other aspects, you can also drive collaboration, right? While, engineers may be developing together, or on their own from their products, but when they come to working for society, they could work together potentially, right? So have you at Embassy and with your ecosystem tried something where you're able to bring more than capital, the human talent part of it, through volunteering or any other initiatives?
Yeah, so maybe I'll share one really exciting initiative that started off at Embassy Services, one of our big companies that does property management. And I think it's a way of bringing talent, bringing people together to enhance culture. And it's something called Embassy Emerald. It was formed by a random set of people who formed a committee together and wanted to drive sustainable initiatives within the company.
Nice.
And when they presented to me, I asked them, what are you guys doing? Very simple things, but amazing, that was infectious and created this energy in the office. They went to the cafeteria, put up a scoreboard, essentially, of how much wet waste, dry waste, food waste was basically being, wasted. And, it was staggering numbers. So they first just educated people, made them aware about what's happening. Then they looked at the data and was like, wow, there's a lot of wet waste. And they found out that the wet waste was attributed to a lot of tissues, a lot of tissues, wet tissues from the toilet. And they realized that the dispenser in the toilet was, when you pull out one, actually like 4 or 5 come out. I think a lot of people have this in some offices. So they just changed that. They just changed the dispenser, so it's a proper dispenser. And they saw the wet waste come down. They saw the food waste come down because people just felt guilty of having that there. So that was something that, they've done so many things besides just waste. But one of those initiatives that, we then set this committee in all our offices, not just embassy services, but now in embassy REIT and embassy developments, in all our embassy offices. And we're driving various initiatives, bringing people together to do it. No one leader, everyone is equal. And it's having this infectious rub-off on culture, and I think that's amazing.
That's a great example, and I think it's wonderful to see how also, as embassy, you can also influence the behavior of a lot of organizations because you are in some sense, an interesting platform. Mr. Rao, coming to you from, you wear 2 hats, the Volvo hat, but also the CII, hat. So let's give you the more difficult problem. How do we work with government? Because we can't be talking about development, without the government. We have to make them partners. We have to align with priorities. Otherwise, we will be pulling it in 2 different directions. So what has been your experience, of aligning between the corporate and the government, especially when it comes to CSR?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because while from the corporates and companies side, today if you look at it, CSR is a board subject. See, the group themes are decided by the board of directors and this. So while of course when this government comes, there are certain priorities. So it's important that there is a synergy between those, the group themes which are approved in your board with the priorities what we have. So that's always a little bit of challenge because if sometimes, for example, take in the state of Karnataka, because education is one of the key priority which government is also want to give, the companies to come forward and support it. But having said that, it is also important that the corporates and companies, they also align with the national priorities, both at the central level and at the state level. I just want to give you one example. For example, if you look at it at the national level, education, the CSR spent in education, if you look at in FY 23-24, 34% of the spend goes into the education, CSR spend I meant. This is primarily because in the, if you look at the infra, in the schools there are gaps in the basic school infrastructure and the learning outcomes also there's a gap. So it is definitely there. If you come to the state, Karnataka, even if it is much more, 40% goes into the CSR. Having said that, I just also want to emphasize the need that the companies also align with the government priorities. I'll just to tell you one example. So when it comes to the education in Karnataka, when it comes to secondary school dropouts, when I say secondary school dropouts, it's the 9th and 10th classes. I mean, it's startling and amazing to hear. It's 22.5% is the secondary school dropout in the state of Karnataka, meaning 1 in 5 students doesn't go beyond 9th and 10th standard. While, of course, it's always good, but it's a major social challenge for us. While, of course, Bangalore is considered to be the Silicon Valley of East, and we have seen, it's a powerhouse of technology. But there is a major social challenge, which the companies also need to realize that it is. Just to compare with that, with our neighborhood states, Kerala is around 3.5%, Tamil Nadu is around 7.5%, Telangana is around 9.5%, Andhra Pradesh is around 11.5%, Karnataka is 22.5%. So this is a very serious social challenge in the basic education, which the companies, the CSR also has to contribute. And also one more thing I would like to give, 45% of the entire CSR spend today happens only in the Bangalore. Nobody want to go to Kalyan, Karnataka. Nobody want to go to North Karnataka or any of the aspirational districts or blocks. So we need to have this inclusive one, and the access to these rural areas also need to be done, because basic infra has to be improved and the learning outcomes also need to be improved. So that is one area where importantly, which we need to align with the governmental priorities.
I think you're making a very, very interesting point, which I want to call out, that government is actually setting societal priorities. While it's government priorities, it's still societal. So by looking at that, those important initiatives, you are able to also add more societal value, from that perspective. Coming back to you, Aditya, you seem to be very good at getting a lot of people together, a lot of organizations together. Any lessons on, one or two important things on how to actually make collaboration happen when it comes to societal good?
To be honest, I think it's just that, like leading by example, you're on the spotlight, so genuinely believing in what you're preaching, and taking people along with you, So as a leader, there's no real playbook on how to become a leader. You kind of just learn on the way. For me, it's been 10 years, but I think the biggest realization is everything that you do, people watch. People want to copy the good things, obviously, stay away from the bad things. So I think you have to just, be the role model for people. So yeah, I think, it's not, there's no one answer for it, I feel.
So it's walk the talk, right? And show and lead by example. And Mr. Rao, from a CI perspective, when you brought organizations together, is there something that you focus on in making sure that there's alignment between companies? Because it also makes sense to talk to the government as one voice. Otherwise it's also harder to kind of engage and work with the government. So what experience from CI on that front?
No, it's definitely a great value it brings, particularly when you look at platforms, like a neutral platform like a CI or BCS or even your embassy REIT. See, it becomes much easier for us to communicate to the government when it comes to the policy advocacy side, and also it can also bring all the stakeholders, whether it is the industry, whether it is the NGOs or even the government with this. I'll just tell you a couple of examples on this, particularly when you look at Bangalore. Because one thing which we have engaged with the Greater Bangalore Authority, including the Chief Commissioner, Mr. Mahesh Rao, we have called him to the CI office. We had a very extensive interaction with the CSR heads. In fact, he was very receptive to do that. And one of the basic things what we discussed is about solid waste management. Today, Bangalore is such a great city, a technology powerhouse. But when we look at, we have big challenges when we look at the garbage management or solid waste management, which we look at how we can improve upon. So we have given a very solid suggestions. For example, when we look at, we have multiple flyovers, we have multiple metro stations, and many of the, underneath the flyovers, many of them become dump yards, because today, people just see that there's nothing there, they keep on dump, or they make it as a forcible parking unit. How can we beautify the city? The simple thing what we said, because this is one area where we need to jointly work towards. We also given suggestions to him, because today as corporates, when we wanted to reach out, as you also mentioned, sometimes in urban center, we have too many challenges to, we have to work out an MOU with them, and, reaching out to the commissioner is very difficult. So we have given simple suggestions. Companies are ready to adopt flyovers, adopt some parks nearby and all. They definitely even can manage certain short distances. But it has to be made very simple through a single window system. The permissions has to be very simple with this. And similarly, the lake rejuvenation. Though there are multiple lakes today, they have also become like a dumping yards for all the construction material being done. But when some of the companies, when they came forward actually to adopt a lake for a rejuvenation, suddenly they found that there are some, resistance coming, and there are some few vested interests coming in. So how can government take responsibility and act as a facilitator? Because if you leave the entire thing to the company, corporate, see, when they are doing a lake rejuvenation, somebody comes and stops the excavators, to start desilting. Where does he go? And nobody need to. So we given some solid suggestions, wherein, in fact, very interestingly, he has made a full note of it. And after 2 months, we are very surprised to see that, in fact, I got a call last week saying that they have made a complete analysis of it. They came with some kind of a single window system, and now the 5 commissioners who are there as a part of the Bangalore commissionerate, you can approach any one of them, and we look forward that. So that was a very positive engagement, and this is one powerful thing, neutral platforms can really make a difference when it comes to the changes.
Very, very interesting, inputs. In summary, Samaj Sarkar Bazaar, need to kind of come together for a thriving bazaar, Samaj and Sarkar. And that's only possible if somebody can take the opportunity of bringing these ecosystems together, and hence platforms become very, very important to drive collaboration. Yeah. So thank you very much. We promised a flash panel. We're done with our flash panel. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you.